Alright, so I found the most optimal way of recording, and as far as recording on the computer, which you guys can't see, it is the size of a planet, and I can't put my mic actually that far because the audio quality would not be as okay as it sounds right now. So I have to look like I'm announcing everything that I'm saying, and the result is awkward hilarity. Now, this series, Aftertaste, is also sort of the definition of awkward hilarity because I've actually been trying to come up with a name for this idea, and now that I finally have a name for this idea, I can actually set it out in stone. Yes, the very title is what prevented me from actually releasing anything like this. And pretty much what this is sort of me marinating on something that I previously have either talked about or consumed, and at the time may have not had an idea or sort of any inkling of what it was about, and then as I listened to it, built an idea, something that's kind of really simple, the development of something. Also, I'm recording from a computer right now instead of my phone because my phone actually was like, look, bruh, if you record for as long as you did, I'm not going to be able to process the file. So you're going to have to figure out something. So I tried, and this is what I figured out. Now, what Aftertaste also is going to be is another avenue for me to talk about songs or albums that may have come out and I simply had not had time and didn't get that window of when it was really out. So Aftertaste sort of gives me a lane, if you will, to talk about something. And in this one, I'm going to pretty much just ramble about Brockhampton's I've been born again. And the fact that I hinted at reincarnation towards the end of that video, if you watch the whole thing, basically towards the end, I kind of talked about the fact that, hey, maybe it might be about that. And then I also, obviously listened to it after I recorded the video, and after listening to it like a good amount of times and sort of gathering my thoughts and letting them kind of marinate as I listened to it over and over again, I realized a couple things, and sort of reincarnation is the main idea in that. And the idea of imperfect reincarnation, basically this sort of plot that we all sort of actually are attempting to reincarnate in our lives. And for those who don't know, reincarnation is sort of the idea that you die and then you are born again. You are born again as an object or like certain other things. Now, if I'm wrong, please educate me. As like I said, I legitimately do appreciate when people let me know what I'm wrong about, so then I am properly prepared, and especially for something like this where it's sort of semi-ramble, semi-coherent thoughts that are sort of more like a bonus feature rather than a legitimately fleshed out series. It's something that I definitely want to keep harping on, and I always appreciate when people hit me up in comments and be like, look, bruh, you got this wrong. You got it wrong, okay? So please don't be afraid to let me know. Now, Brockhampton and the idea of imperfect reincarnation and what that means is that basically Brockhampton is sort of within their single I've been born again implying, and I want to preface this by saying I am doing the thing with what Mr. Fantastic and Elastigirl can do without effort, reaching. I am basically doing a reach. So if I reach, you are free to roast. If not, you are still free to roast. But basically, the idea of imperfect reincarnation and what that means as far as Brockhampton goes and what it represents for us humans overall. Basically, what I realized in my initial viewing was that obviously, it's colored a little bit by hype. It's colored a little bit by bias because I am basically a Brockhampton fan. Most of the songs that I've talked about are from artists that I'm fans of. Sometimes it's artists that I have been, sort of introduced to either through friends or the internet. And usually there's always some kind of bias that we're all kind of colored with. Now, I'm no professional reviewer. I don't have sort of this lengthy knowledge on music or anything like that. But I feel like I have sort of at least a basic understanding of Brockhampton and sort of the characters that lie within it. And when I say characters, I'm not saying that these guys are fictional beings that don't have real life struggles or real life problems that make up their everyday lives. In fact, it's quite the opposite. these guys do have problems and things that plague their everyday lives just like us, and that's what makes them so appealing. That's what makes any good story or any kind of good plot appealing, is when these characters are flawed and they're not perfect, but they can illustrate it to us in a manner that makes us go, oh my god. And the thing about imperfect reincarnation is that these guys are going through it. Pretty much Saturation Trilogy was them in their hunger phase. And most people who are fans of artists are usually, or at least most people who are fans of artists that have already had their big success and have sort of still releasing music, but there's a lack of luster there, and that luster, that particular luster that's missing, is the sort of hunger that may have been there, because their lives have changed, and when your life changes, you can't stay the same. And if you try to stay the same, if you stubbornly put a square peg in a round hole, you're only going to just find yourself in the middle of a wall. And what happens is, again, like I said, fans lament that, change. Sometimes the evolution is not what you expected, and that's okay. That's something that happens. And with Brockhampton, they evolved. It was just something that fans probably didn't expect, because no growth is linear. And so within this particular set of guys, their situation seemed like they were just going to be on the up, and there wasn't anything that could really stop it. And then the Amir situation happened, and everybody kind of processed it. Fans processed it. Brockhampton, more importantly, processed it as people. Not only were they losing a band member who was particularly vital / instrumental in their success, he was somebody that people felt was a rising star within those ranks next to Kevin Abstract. And speaking of Kevin, he was particularly close to Kevin Abstract. So these factors, sort of contributed to the change that we got, and then we followed them into the best years of our lives. Ironically, I don't know if it's been the best years of our lives, but basically we followed them into that, and we started to see the tone shift, not just in how literally Amir was gone, and so you had to watch Brockhampton sort of evolve and adapt to that, but then how like structurally, what's narratively would they talk about. And pretty much everyone wanted them to talk about that situation, which they, to their credit, avoided, because I guess it's still a personal thing at the end of the day, and they're not gonna want to have to rehash it on every single interview. And I'm glad that the interviews that do kind of respect that space that they've asked for. So with I've Been Born Again, after we went through the best years of our lives, we got to the Iridescence, where it seemed as though they were trying to find their footing. It felt like every single after Saturation was not only them basically kind of saying, this is sort of us now, this is what we are, but also them sort of coming back together after they've been broken apart. Humpty Dumpty falls off the well, then he gets put back together again. And the thing about falling, the thing about life, is that when you are broken or you fail in some manner, it sort of shifts the things that you can do, and it sort of shifts your behavior. But how you respond to that is usually what is indicative of, or indicative of, your reincarnation, your imperfect reincarnation. And the idea that your character may stay the same, you may still do some of the same things that you did, but there's still those scars or sort of memories that shape how you respond to new things, how you make anything new. And I think that that's particularly true within I've Been Born Again. After Iridescence, like I said, it felt like they were trying to find their footing, and with I've Been Born Again, it seems as though their sound has finally reached a sort of it sort of married the Saturation feeling, where it felt like the chemistry was whole, and it married that with this new sect. We still have the same guys, we still have the same sort of cast of characters, missing one, and rightfully so after the situation, but missing one, but now it feeling like we've understood this, and this has been established, and it's not anything new, fresh, and shocking to the system. And so with an imperfect reincarnation, like I said, the characteristics typically don't get this insane shift. Like I said, the idea of a reincarnation typically is you die and then you come back as something different. This would be sort of similar to ego death, although I wouldn't say that the egos of these guys need to be killed. It's not as though Kevin or any other ones of them were arrogant in any manner, but they have retained some of the things that they've gone through and been able to refine it. And that's what I hear in this song. That's something that stuck with me after my initial listen, not just the excitement. They may have blurred some of my thoughts, but the idea that it felt more like this was a refined Brockhampton, still within those same stylings that made them so originally appealing in the first place. The other things that I noticed that are hinted at within this too is that Bareface's whispers, which I didn't know was Bareface. I'm just going off of the fact that Fantano said it. Everybody else seems to be saying that it's Bareface, so I'll just take it. I'll just take it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Please educate me. Like I said before, I appreciate it. Bareface, one things he says within his little whisper verse is happy belated. And again, the song is called I've Been Born Again, imperfect reincarnation. I want to stress that if I haven't already. Imperfect meaning that you come back, but you don't come back perfectly new. And happy belated would imply that Bareface missed your birthday, which, come on, man. Bareface, what are you doing? That you got to pay attention to everybody's birthday. You should know, and you should be freaking totally aware of, like, the thousands of fans and their birthdays. Gosh. Anyway, that implies sort of imperfection, that idea of missing something that you were supposed to do at a certain time. Next to this, the birthday, obviously, Matt's outro verse actually kind of maybe potentially hints at this, with the fact that he makes the statement that, they ain't knocking no more, send them out the door. Send them out the door and they ain't knocking no more are clashing statements, because if you're sending someone out, it's usually due to something that they did to incite some sort of frustration or anger, and so you send them out. You cast out anything within your life that has brought you frustration, anger, or irritation in the same manner. And then if they ain't knocking no more, if we're to look at that in that same light, then that would mean that, like, these demons, these mistakes, these issues, these flaws that have been bugging you aren't bothering you anymore, because you have changed as an individual. And so it's sort of this clash, because it's a loop. You can change and you can still have mistakes follow you. It reminds me actually of Tame Impala's song, the New Person, Same Old Mistakes, and where it sort of shares that same philosophy of changing, but not shifting so hard that, like, you're completely new. Maybe a little bit more that it does feel like it's a hard shift, the way that there's sort of an internal battle in that song. But here it's sort of subtle. And I mean, it's subtle with the fact that Kevin is still talking about the same things, but his tone of voice seems to imply that he's sort of come to terms with it in a way, and he's not afraid of it, and he's not trying to hide from it necessarily. And it's not that he was doing that in his solo album. In his solo album, it seemed as though he was just navigating it. Well, in this one, he's kind of just referencing it and sort of sees it in a different light. Not only that, but the characteristics of every guy on here. Not from Kevin talking about, the same issues of being gay and a rapper within a genre that doesn't necessarily accept him, but as generations continue to grow, there has been a lot more, and thankfully so, acceptance for rappers of different sexualities, because it's okay to be gay. They're like, dude, let people do what they want. Sexual preferences should not affect your enjoyment of things, seriously. But not just that, you have Joba's verse, which did definitely receive a lot of I think Joba and Merlin are somehow the two most polarizing members at the moment, because whenever there's a new song with those guys on it, and their verses are sort of analyzed or critiqued, usually the thing that happens is people are frustrated that they stay the same. Merlin has that kind of belligerent, raucous energy that people love, and Joba has sort of this, as someone mentioned on Reddit, this Joker-esque type of vibe to him, where he's constantly sort of, his verses don't necessarily have a cohesive story. They sort of seem shattered like glass pieces all over a floor. And when I hear it, I like it. I like the delivery and the charisma of both those guys. And it also helps me understand why people might like something that I don't like. Because typically, one of the arguments someone might say for something I don't like is, well, I like the way he sounds. I like the way he sounds. And for me, when I hear Joba and Merlin deliver certain lines, even if it's like hilarious, like Merlin kind of talking about the absurdity of liking a girl so much that he let her touch his butt. I mean, you know, you can like a girl, nigga touch your butt, it's cool. Free butts 2019. But yeah, those two are pretty polarizing, but they've also shifted and evolved. Joba is able to sort of take his charisma and his sassiness and the character that he poses within this sort of fictional Brockhampton group of like rapping. I mean, like when they're rapping, they're sort of, you're an artist, and typically people don't look at artists as humans. They look at them as illustrators of some type of thing, using maybe personal references, but still making something new that other people can consume. And for Joba, I just enjoy and appreciate the charisma, and same with Merlin. Like, I like the fact that he said that with the most absolute confidence. I like the fact that even though Joba's like verses kind of bounce all over the place, if you look at them, they're not necessarily, again, they're not full of substance. He's talking about smoking and gnomes and Jesus and things of that nature, which is something he focused on in previous ones, where it was sort of this idea of like, if you doubt me, that's on you, or that's your ass. But I like the fact that he's unafraid, and I like the fact that even though within Saturation there was a narrative that all of the guys seem to follow, this one is allowing them all to embrace their individual selves and bring it together in a collaborative format that, even though we don't have a set narrative here, I think that's because of the thing I hinted at about people lamenting their favorite artists shifting. I think it's the same thing here, where Brockhampton doesn't really have, what do you want them to talk about? I don't know what significant situation has come out recently that they've been affected by. We're almost a few years removed from we're almost a year removed from Iridescence coming out. So, you know, they're not in that headspace anymore. And there's nothing crazy happening in their lives that I know about that has lent to itself to them having to talk about it. And so when you don't have a narrative, typically you might talk about the general. You might talk about yourself. And so I think that for Brockhampton to succeed, they're probably going to continue to stay within this general realm where they don't approach any specific narrative, and instead they just kind of continue this imperfect reincarnation. As they all come back, they still have similar characteristics that we know and love, but they've still shifted in some way. That shift is just really, really subtle. It's not overt. It's not jovert. It's not overt and it's not obvious, but there's, like I said, the confidence in Kevin's voice. Even though Joba's lines don't have much in way of story, his character has kind of developed over time, because like I said, in the Saturation series, these guys had the same characteristics, but it was just done in the favor of a narrative. Whatever that song was, it would usually ask them to talk about something specific, and we would get some pretty meaningful things out of them. It's not that these guys aren't versatile, but this is the style that they like. And so bringing these individuals together in their imperfect reincarnation gives you a song like I've Been Born Again. Of course, this is my aftertaste of the fact. This is me after marinating on the song, and I could be completely wrong, and that's cool, that's fine. But I think it's interesting. I think it's something that we can relate to as human beings, because within the age of social media, the idea that, you know, changing should be something that we do is usually also kind of exacerbated by the fact that when we look at Twitter, when we look at Instagram, when we look at all these social media sites, everyone seems to be doing really well. And it's pretty exhausting because then you look at yourself, you're like, gosh, I'm not really doing anything. I'm not really doing much. So we all are technically actually just going through imperfect reincarnations every day, trying to achieve something, whether it be cutting off our hair or changing our fashion. We're trying to change something about ourselves that may take more time than we realize. And I think, I've been born again is sort of a representation of that. Retaining characteristics and chemistry of a band that had songs that were appealing prior and taking those experiences that have now shaped them and bringing it back within that same chemistry after recovering and, living life a little bit. I think that's the same thing for people. We literally probably go through stuff trying to achieve some massive grandiose change, and we end up at that change in a cyclical manner without even realizing it. So yeah, I've been born again. To me, sort of represents an imperfect reincarnation and the shifting of our own lives in gradual ways, and being able to embrace that gradual change that is something that I think should be important for all of us, and not necessarily worrying about making something immediately grandiose. I mean, as you can see, I have my own setbacks, and that just means that my path is not as linear as I would like it to be, but that's fine. I don't think anybody wants a perfectly linear path. We get bored if we're like level 900 and it only took us like 2 hours, versus like we're level 900 after 3 years, which means that game better had a lot of updates, but I digress. Yeah, those are my bonus thoughts on my bonus unedited thoughts on Brockhampton's single I've Been Born Again, which I want to say is a prelude to an album, Ginger, I believe, and I am excited for that to come out. If you made it all the way here through my rambling, I only have one question for you, and that is, what kind of imperfect reincarnation are you dealing with? What is something you're journeying towards that may have taken longer, like you've run into? And to avoid making this essay question, I'm going to stop like adding on to the question. So yeah, let me know what change you're trying to attain and how you're going about that. Well, this guy says, this has been the aftertaste of Brockhampton's I've Been Born Again. Spoiler alert, it's good. It still tastes good. It's like freaking, it's like water right after you chewed some mint gum, and that water is like cold as ice. It's pretty good. Well, this guy says, reincarnation. You could come back as a bonsai tree. Or you could come back as a blanket. Yeah, a blanket.